I'm Garrett the Goy Rathke, and I'm here with Jake Brown. Jake, would it be fair to say that you're kind of a Jake of all trades?
Yeah, I think that would actually be pretty accurate.
So tell us your story, man. What kind of things have you done? What kind of things are you into now?
I pretty much do anything that interests me. Uh, a lot of people might think that I bounce around to things, but I'm always looking for opportunities, and you just have to keep an open mind and be able to see them whenever they come along. So I've done a lot of different things over the years. I guess you could call it my side gig, which is 3D modeling, prototypes for inventions, and things like that that I've done over the years. My most recent big project with that was for the Detroit, Michigan Opera House. I designed for them for a opera called Cose fan tutte, which is a Mozart opera from when Mozart was alive, and it was adapted to be kind of a mashup between a Renaissance era knights and princess to a modern, more futuristic combination with AI, humanoid AI. So same concept of the story, princes and princesses warring for the princess, but it was humanoid AI that I actually 3D modeled the costumes for. I've also ran a tech support company for local small businesses for about 12 years, and I've dabbled here and there in a few other things as well.
That's so cool, man. What would you say has been the craziest or like coolest 3D modeling project that you've done?
Well, I would say probably as far as the scale of it, the 3D models for the Opera House were pretty awesome. But I also had an opportunity years ago to work with the uh, organization that was owned by Warner Brothers. It was like their YouTube version of Warner Brothers. It was called Machinima. And I ended up 3D modeling and building out a full suit of armor. And they were looking for that character. And they called me out to California. And I ended up doing a rap battle video in a full suit of armor for for Machinima, which was their the YouTube channel that was owned by Warner Brothers. And unfortunately, they ended up closing the studio about a month or so after I did that recording in green room, in studio, and it never saw the light of day. But those are probably my two uh, coolest that I've ever done, just because of the circumstances, not necessarily because of the artwork or how intricate it was, but just the opportunity to work with both of those companies.
That's amazing. So I can see your pew pew shooter in the background. Were you in the military?
I was in the military. I was in the Army. Yes, sir.
I'd like to hear about your timeline. How did you transition into the military, and then what was it like getting out of it?
So I went in the military in 2007. I officially got off active duty in summer of 2012. Majority of the time, whenever I was in the Army, I lived in South Korea and lived in Germany. But because I grew up on a farm in Oklahoma, a small town, I graduated in a class of 63 in high school. And so, we were the type of school where you'd carry shotguns in the window of your truck to school because you were going hunting, quail or dove or something like that after school, after football practice. And so that's the kind of town that I grew up in. And I still live only about 2 miles from where I grew up now that I'm no longer in the military and stuff. But anyway, so I grew up on a farm and building with my hands. So woodworking, blacksmithing, leatherworking, all these different things, building fence, building barns. When you grow up on a farm, you don't really have access. You don't really have the money to pay for somebody else to do all these things. So you learn how to do it from your grandpa or your dad or whatever. So whenever I went in the military and lived overseas, I always kind of had an interest in technology. I just thought it was cool through my uncle who taught me how to build computers in the mid 90s before computers were in schools. He bought and sold computer parts to go to college in the mid 90s when he was going to college to become a chiropractor. Well, my grandmother was a widow. And so whenever he came back from college in the mid 90s, he started taking care of my mother, like my grandmother. They lived together, and I was still a young kid. In the summertime, I would go over there and he would teach me how to build computers because that was kind of like a hobby of his. Anyway, so whenever I went in the military, I grew up with the background of building computers, a lot of technology, but also on the other side of my family, it was all about farming and working with your hands, physical labor and stuff like that. So living overseas in South Korea and in Germany during my length of time in the military, and then ultimately going to deployment in Afghanistan. But I didn't have access to a physical space for creativity. And so I got into 3D modeling in the military because of the lack of physical space of creativity. I went to the digital space of creativity, and I would build computers for other guys in the military just as a little side hobby, side job. But I was also 3D modeling and modding video games in the military to get to scratch that creative itch whenever I wasn't doing army stuff, right? And so anyway, when I transitioned back out of the military, came back home, I had decided that I didn't want to work for anybody else. I was, the military had kind of helped me decide that I didn't want to work for anybody else anymore. And so I pursued a business doing tech support because prior to the military, whenever I was a kid, everybody would have me come over to their house, fix their computers. I was helping my computer teacher in high school fix their computers just because of the knowledge that I had. So whenever I came back from the army, I wanted to go to back to college, started doing that, but then I still had, hey Jake, you're back in town for X amount of years. My computer's been jacked up. Can you come over and take a look at it? Family member, friend, something like that. That culminated into starting a small business tech support because I was tired of going into people's homes after about 6 months to a year. And I was like, maybe I can get into businesses. So I started knocking doors, going to businesses and asking if they needed any computer help. And so that culminated into a business of working for myself, running a tech support company. It's kind of been crazy. I never really pursued any of these in any fashion other than just like, here's an opportunity in front of me where I can make money or something that interests me. It wasn't like this long-term goal from when I was a child thinking, well, this is what I'm going to do when I get older. It wasn't anything like that.
Has tech support been affected by AI at all?
Since the more so prevalence of AI, you know what I mean? It's just kind of more in the everyday sphere. It's on your phone now, it's on your computer. I haven't really had to suffer from AI taking over my job because I had already started to kind of transition away from tech support, which is another part of where I'm headed now. I kind of saw that on the horizon, but I had also kind of came to the point where I was tired of even going, like I said earlier, I was tired of going into somebody's house. And so I switched to business. And then I kind of got to the point where I was tired of going into people's businesses and I wanted to just kind of transition out of tech support. But I had financially positioned myself over the years to where I was gradually working my way to a point where I wasn't going to need to work outside of my home anymore. And, you know, like I said earlier, I just took the opportunity that was there. It wasn't really a life goal of mine to have a tech support company. So before the prevalence of AI in everyday space, I had already kind of started transitioning away from the tech support. So for me personally, it hasn't really affected me much. However, in 3D modeling, depending on what you're looking for as a client, it is starting to affect 3D modeling as well, because I do that kind of as a side job. It's more of a hobby, a pastime, something that I enjoy that I can make a little bit of extra money at. But now you can, which is called photogrammetry, you can take multiple photos from multiple angles, whether it be from 3D scanning or from a 2D image that you can put into an AI system, and it can kind of auto-generate what's behind that model if you're just looking at it from one plane. And so basic images, basic objects, AI can already 3D generate these models. However, that's not really what I do. So it isn't affecting me yet, but I can potentially see that affecting me in the near future. But I'm also trying to transition away from pursuing money as much as I was with 3D modeling. And I'm just sheerly trying to go for the passive aspect of selling those models rather than pursuing individual clients. So I'm trying to anticipate the way the markets are going to change. I'm always trying to be 5 to 10 years ahead of current times. And so I'm just trying to plan ahead.
Now, of course, it will vary depending on the market and the industry, but where do you think various industries and markets, like broadly speaking, are tending to trend in the next 5 to 10 years?
So I don't really think AI will be able to do the same thing I can do with 3D modeling in any.
Mhm.
I have been inquisitive with AI, whether it be through text-based or seeing what its capabilities are when it comes down to generating 3D models from a 2D image, just because I wanted to investigate my competition, if that makes sense, right? Like, what is this really capable of? And with somebody like me that is very precise with the 3D models that I create, AI can't compete with that. It can't right now. And I don't see it being able to really in any near time frame. At least within 5 to 10 years, maybe 10 years. I mean, who knows what 10 years holds, but I can't see it really doing what I do in the next 5 years just because of how precise I am with what I do. And it doesn't really have that creative ability as it stands now, and that might change. That being said, I see AI taking over a lot of automation, a lot of data entry, a lot of things that are just kind of button press pusher jobs, not necessarily jobs like trades. I think it's really important nowadays for our younger generations to focus on more trade skills because those jobs aren't going to be replaced by AI until we have robots all over the place. And those robots, I mean, if you're paying attention to Optimus or some of Lockheed Martin's or some of these other companies, robots out there, they're just not capable of operating and doing things the same way that a human being can do. They're just not as dexterous. They're not as nimble. They can't do that. So we're going to need worker bees and we're going to need skilled worker bees. And so ultimately, I think that our generations up and coming need to really focus on things like trades, welders, carpenters, plumbers, electricians. These types of jobs aren't going to be taken over by AI, you know, in the near future. I know I keep saying in the near future, but I don't see that happening at least for the next 10 years or more. So that's what I would encourage young people to do. It's what I'm encouraging my children to do, not only for somebody else, but they could start their own business as a tradesman, whether they're, even a tile, somebody that does tile, somebody that does flooring or anything like that. I mean, you're going to make a ton of money doing a job like that rather than just sitting behind a computer because having a job sitting behind a computer anymore really isn't going to be the next 10 or 20 years. I think the next 10 or 20 years for the people that are making money are going to be the people that are actually on the ground, physically working, and so on and so forth. And that being said, I don't think manufacturing is really going to be, there's not going to be a lot of jobs in manufacturing. I think a lot of that is going to be optimized as well. And so, again, I think trades are where you're at, trades and services.
Yeah, that touches on sort of the historical trends of how people worked throughout history. So like for most of human history, it was just agriculture and people just barely scratching a living with like making enough food to eat and feed their family. And then in the 19th century, we had the Industrial Revolution. And then in the 20th century was the information era, and AI now has come along, which may be a different revolution or just a continuation of the information era. But at any rate, with AI now, which is like extremely accelerated the information revolution, some people are saying that it's kind of bringing things full circle when it comes to work. And so a lot of people who, like myself, worked in office spaces now are transitioning out of that, and they're looking for more individualized work, kind of like back on the farm. May or may not necessarily be a farm, it could be a business, but work trends are definitely changing. Like office jobs, high-paying office jobs used to be creme de la creme, the best kind of job you could get. That is no longer the case. So for young people entering the workforce, or people like myself who have been in the office kind of corporate industry for a long time, what would you advise them? Because maybe some people just kind of suck at the trades, like they're not very handy with their hands, like myself. What kind of advice would you give to people like me?
You know, I said earlier that I take opportunities where I see them, but I've also been the type of person that if I try something and I don't enjoy it, that I move on. And I'm not the type of person that just bounces around to different jobs. Like I've been doing tech support for the better part of 12 years working for myself. And then I'll always have little side things that I pursue. I think while you're young, if you can try different things rather than just saying, I'm going to go get a job being an electrician when you're 16 years old as an apprentice and think that you're going to do that for the rest of your life, maybe get a job when you're 16 as an electrician's apprentice and do that for 2 months. And then get a job as a welder for 2 months and go to Votech for 2 months and learn to some other trade and then try this for 2 months. Maybe you want to do graphic art or graphic design, or maybe you want to, because AI has a hard time with text. AI is not doing a really good job with text. So I don't think AI is going to take over text-based or graphic design just anytime soon. I mean, you could do things like logo design. You could do things like oh, I don't know, maybe some creative aspects of things. If you want to get into some form of art, music, or something like that, while you're under the protection of your parents still, I would say pursue things like that rather than just jumping off the deep end and thinking, oh, my grandpa told me to be an electrician or an HVAC guy, and that's what I'm going to start off, and I'm going to go to Votech and do that. And then you're just going to go full speed ahead and think you're going to do that for the next 20 years. And while you're doing it, you're miserable and you're drinking yourself to sleep every night and you're beating your kids and you know what I mean? Because you're absolutely miserable with the life that you've created. And I'm not an advocate for that. I'm not saying everybody that ends up as an electrician or HVAC guy ends up uh, in that result, but I'm just saying while you're young, try some things. You know, I think it's important for all of our youth to experience what it is to serve others. So be a volunteer firefighter for a while. Maybe join the National Guard. Maybe become a volunteer police officer. You can become a volunteer county sheriff, and that's serving others, right? You get to see a different aspect of society. I think it's good for all of our youth to experience what it is to wait tables, because whenever you're going out to eat at a restaurant, you understand what it is to kind of be inconsiderate of somebody waiting on you. And there's not a lot of people that have those that get to see that side of life. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of people out there that wait tables and stuff like that in the service industry. But you have a lot of people that have never done that. So they go to a restaurant and have like this sense of entitlement and they're disrespectful. And I'm not even talking about tipping, because I'm the type of person that tips based on service, not based on percentage of the overall check. Dude, I'll be the best tipper out there if you give good service, but at the same time, I'm not going to tip as well if you aren't performing to the best of your capabilities, or what I think your capabilities. I served tables for 2 years when I first started. Whenever I turned 16 when I was younger, and I was really good at it, but I worked at it. I hustled. You know what I mean? I really figured it out. But I also had two older sisters that had been serving tables before me that kind of taught me the ropes, because they'd been doing it for a lot longer than I had. Anyway, so I'm just saying there's plenty of things out there. I don't know what that looks like for the individual, because obviously we're different. I think there's a lot of people out there that want to become video game coders. Well, guess what? AI is going to take over video game coding in a lot of ways. I think there's a lot of people out there that want to be game developers, or somebody that's developing apps. But Elon Musk said the other day that your phone isn't going to look like it does today. We're not going to have apps on our phone in 5 years. It's just going to be anything and everything that you want from your phone is going to be auto-generated by AI. So apps are going to go out the window too. So I think things are going to look different in 5 years, but I think anything that's actually in the physical world is going to be beneficial to that person pursuing that job, rather than trying to just base our entire society off the digital realm, which I don't think is going to be as lucrative as people think it's going to be.
Have you ever tried crypto mining, or would you be interested in it?
I've never personally mined crypto. I kicked it around back in the day. I had a couple buddies that were into Bitcoin back in 2009, 10, 11 area. And I didn't really have the time to concentrate on it. I mean, I missed the mark on Bitcoin. I wish I would have got into it back then. I've never minded, but nowadays when it comes to crypto, I'm looking at use case scenario. For somebody like me that doesn't have just thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars laying around, I'd love to be able to get into the store of value that is Bitcoin. But I happen to believe Bitcoin is going to come down because it doesn't have quite the use case scenario, the utility that some of the other tokens out there has or have. And so I've been putting money into other cryptos since about 2015, 16, 17 timeframe. And I have some that I've kind of pay attention to that have a lot more partnerships than Bitcoin does. And it's a lot faster and cheaper to send. So Bitcoin is great. I'd love to have been in it, but with it being over $100,000 now per token, there's not as much potential for me to make money getting into Bitcoin as there is buying into some other tokens that I think have a strong potential to have large scale adoption in the very near future.
What are some various kinds of cryptocurrencies and how are they different from Bitcoin? Because Bitcoin, of course, is kind of like the flagship cryptocurrency, but there are others out there. They just may not be as well known. So can you talk to that for a second?
Well, Bitcoin is expensive to transfer and it costs the energy that it takes and how slow it is.
What do you mean by transfer?
To go from me to you. So let's say I have a hardware wallet or I have a exchange where I'm holding Bitcoin on my phone, a phone application or something like that, that ultimately allows you to send that between two people through an application, just like if you were to send money through PayPal or Cash App or Venmo. Same concept when it comes down to the digitized version of the US dollar or potentially other currencies that are able to transfer money through those different platforms. There are exchanges that are essentially like digital banks that hold these crypto coins, these blockchain coins, and different types of coin technologies. And they allow you to send it from one person's custody to another person's custody. And there's different technology but behind different tokens, but behind different crypto coins. So for instance, if you go to like with the US dollar and the current financial system with the central bank and Swift, Swift is essentially the electronic system behind all of the money that's moved worldwide right now. And so if you go to Lowe's, Walmart, wherever, and you buy something and you're like, okay, cool, I transferred that money. And you're like, well, you go home and it's not what you needed. You take it back the next day and you're like, hey, I want to get this, I want to return this deal. You take it to customer service and they say, well, it's going to be three to 7 business days before you notice that money back in your account. People were like, what? Why? I paid you and I got it yesterday. So I'm giving it back to you. I want my money back now. But they don't realize that that money that they sent to them yesterday that were transacted and was supposedly going into their hands, that business's hand yesterday, hasn't even landed in that business's account in most cases. Different cases, different circumstances dictate. But the reason why it takes 3 to 7 business days is because that money is still in transit because the technology behind that money transferring from one location to another is so slow, it takes a long time. So whenever you think about that money transferring, whenever it comes down to buying stocks through the stock market and people working up at Wall Street and stuff like that, there are trillions of dollars on a daily basis that are tied up in transit. And so if that money was to go from you to me because you bought something from me, I can't use that money for let's just say 3 days, although it's mine because it's still locked up in transit. And I might miss out on an opportunity to make money by buying a different stock at a better price because today I want to buy it, but I don't have the money in my hand. And 3 days from now, from at the time that that money actually comes to me, that price might be different. And so there is a tremendous amount of money on a daily basis that is being lost in that aspect. But then not only that, it takes 3 days or so to do a wire transfer across the ocean to a different country, these types of things. So, we can pick up the phone or get on the internet and we can call somebody on the other side of the world, and that technology is there, but it doesn't work the same way with money. And that's why cryptocurrency came in to exist. No, there's many different reasons, and we can go off in the weeds in a future, talk, but that's one of the main reasons, is because money is moved so slow and it needs to catch up to the modern times. Well, Bitcoin, I kind of use this analogy that Bitcoin was essentially the Model T of crypto coins. It was the beginning. It was fancy, flashy. It had never existed before, arguably, and everybody bought into it, and it skyrocketed in value, and that's why it's so valuable. It's kind of like the digital version of gold is what Bitcoin is, and it was the Model T. However, the Model T isn't a technologically advanced, vehicle like a Tesla today. And so there are crypto coins that you could kind of use that same analogy for. Bitcoin comparatively to XRP or XDC or XLM or Cardano or Solana or ADA, all these different crypto coins that have a different type of technology, that the root algorithm behind that technology, for lack of a better way of explaining it or way of understanding it, is faster than what Bitcoin is. So Bitcoin, Model T, XRP, Tesla. It's just the difference between the two. I have no doubt that there will always be a store of value, or at least for the next 10 years or so, in Bitcoin. And so it will be valuable. I think it's going to come down from where it is now. I'm not a financial advisor, but I'm the type of person that tries to plan ahead and set my family up for success in the future. Because just like if I buy a stock or whatever, I want to try and capitalize on the opportunity to make money. And so just to give you a little bit of example of why I think XRP is one to keep an eye on, is because out of all the crypto coins that exist worldwide, it has more financial partnerships between itself, its company, and the current banking system that already exists above all other crypto coins. There's more partnerships it has with financial institutions than any other crypto coin that exists. And there's really no other crypto coin that transfers faster and cheaper than XRP.
A lot of people are experiencing kind of technological burnout. There's just too much, there's information overload. It's overwhelming and maybe even discouraging, hearing about all the things that AI can do. And there's sort of a general anxiety and fear of losing work or just not getting surpassed by others. And there's just too much to learn. So what would you say to people feeling overwhelmed or stressed out by so many technological changes so quickly?
Okay. So I told you I grew up on a farm. And part of growing up on a farm means that you kind of learn to be self-sufficient because you can't afford to pay other people to do things. So you learn to do things on your own. One of the reasons I enjoyed growing up on a farm is because I could walk out back to the chicken coop and grab some eggs if we were out in the fridge. My grandmother and my mom, and they knew how to cook from scratch. The food quality was a lot better. There's a lot less ingredients, so it's a lot more nutritionally dense. When you're growing your own fruits and vegetables, they taste better when you're picking them out of your own garden. And so my wife and I have been married about 12 years now. We've got 4 kids. We homeschool all of them, but we raise our own cattle. We raise our own pigs. We raise our own chickens, egg layers, meat birds, and we raise our own sheep. We butcher pretty much all of them ourselves, other than the cattle, because we're not set up for something that large yet. And but we take it to a local butcher, and we also I usually get two or three deer a year between my father-in-law and I, and we usually dehydrate it, turn it into jerky, make our own sausage. It's really a beneficial way of living because we're not relying on other people to raise our children for us. We're not, which ultimately opens them up to be misled from what our desires are, our state of mind is, the relationship that we want to have with our children, our family, and God. And so, whenever you don't have a close relationship with them, it just opens the door for unfortunate things to happen. That doesn't mean I shelter my children to where they don't work, they don't have to earn what they get, that they aren't aware of the outside world. They are very aware, but we have a good sense of self-sufficiency in our family because whenever COVID came around, when people in large cities couldn't find food in the stores, because I'm not saying there was no food, but there were food shortages and access to different types of items and stuff like that. Um, we didn't have to worry about that. We didn't have to worry about it at all. And literally, I was talking to my 9-year-old son the other day that was born in 2016, and he was like, I was like, I can't even remember how we got on the conversation. I was like, "Do you remember COVID and this, that, and the other?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, well, we raise our own food and we do these types of things so that if anything like that happens, he was talking about chores and why we had to do it, why we have all these animals. And I was like, well, I can't believe I never explained that now that you're older and you can understand to where you know why. But anyway, we got into the conversation and I was like, well, during COVID, there was food shortages. There was lack of, capability of going and buying this and buying that. It was a lot more expensive and these types of things. And he was like, people couldn't buy food? That's crazy. I never thought, I had no idea. And I was like, well, the reason why is because the way that we live our life. You never knew that it was any different because whether it's COVID is happening or, it's just normal everyday way of life, the way it's been in the United States for the last 20 years, we're going to still keep living our life the same way. Self-sufficiency, depending on ourselves, depending on our family, depending on our neighbors, helping our neighbors, them helping us. And that's the type of community we want to build. And that's what we want. That's what we're supposed to do. And so anyway, you were asking, AI is scary and cryptocurrency is evil and the mark of the beast and all these different types of things. I think it's really important for the modern man, the modern father, the modern leader of a family to be a master of two universes, a master of two planes of existence, a master of two worlds. We have to be very, very capable in the analog world. We have to, not only from the aspect of being able to protect our family and being aware of our surroundings and situationally aware, so that if something like COVID comes down the pipe in the future, that we're just not going to be caught with our pants down, proverbially. You know what I mean? And we also need to be the master of the digital realm as well. Because if we're not, we're going to be left behind if we pursue our own businesses, our own opportunities, because there's no denying that the vast majority of the world is going to be living in the digital world, the digital realm. But I also think that it's incredibly important for us to be grounded in the analog real world. And so we have to be the master of two worlds. And so I pay attention to what's happening with crypto. I pay attention to what's happening with AI. I'm not going to I want to know about it because just like when you go into battle, you have intelligence gathering that's done beforehand because you never want to go into battle unless you have the upper hand. That's ultimately the way that the US military operates. The only way the US military goes into an operation is if they have the upper hand and they have plenty of intelligence in order to maneuver in that environment. Well, I kind of take the same philosophy. AI's, I can't stop AI. I can't personally. There is a ripple effect, and I am very vocal, and I have been since 2012 at least, about different things going on in the world, the way that I see it, and trying to kind of help us course correct back to what I think humanity needs to concentrate on and in the direction we need to head. But at the same time, I'm not going to allow new inventions or new realms of existence to come about without me being aware of them so that I can learn how to utilize them to benefit my family and not get taken advantage of by them or not get left behind by them. And so whenever it comes down to AI and crypto, I treat that the same way. I need to be aware of it so that I can maneuver around it properly, use it whenever it's to my advantage, but not let it take control over me and my children. Because it's like, if I'm not aware of who my children's friends are, if they went to public school, if I'm not involved in their life on their cell phone that they have access to, and I'm not keeping tabs on who they're talking to on what social media app or some, if I'm not keeping tabs and being involved and being aware and having talks with them ahead of time, I'm opening myself and them up for vulnerability. And I don't want that to happen. So just like I try to be 5 to 10 years ahead, regardless of what it is, just like I try to be self-sustaining in the life that I live, whether it be through food or being able to do things on my own with my bare hands, I want to be able to be in that same situation whenever it comes down to crypto and AI as well.
Well, Jake, before we wrap it up, where can people find you online?
Uh, you can find me on X, Original Jake B, at Original Jake B on X. That's pretty much just where I talk about day-to-day everything going on. At one point in time, I was on YouTube as Patriot Shepherd and on Rumble and on a couple other platforms as well as Patriot Shepherd. But when 2021 rolled around, I was banned, blocked, and deleted off of almost every social media platform because they said I was gigged for medical misinformation whenever I was telling people the best thing you can do for your health is to eat healthy and exercise and have a spiritual relationship with your creator, Jesus Christ, God, you know what I mean? And so I was literally banned, blocked, and deleted and lost a really substantial YouTube channel because of that. And so anyway, I was even banned off of Twitter 2 or 3 times, been banned off of Instagram, been banned off of Facebook. And nothing I said on any of those broadcasts is any different than what I've talked about here today. But anyway, you can find me on X now at Original Jake B. You can find me on my website for 3D models, shepherdcreations.net. You can find me on YouTube at Shepherd Creations, which is my 3D modeling channel. You can see live streams and videos that I've put out of the 3D models that I've created. It's just a little hobby thing for me, makes a little money on the side. And then you can also find my YouTube channel for my farm, which is called The Corinthian Farm on YouTube as well.